Hello, Thrive Nation. It's all about a 98% success rate here with Dr. John Oberg. He's reversed diabetes. If you've got metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, you're really struggling, there is a new way, there is new hope. At the end of this podcast, I want to just instill hope, just a future, a way, a plan, a strategy with someone who's using AI, a data-centric model to help many, many people. So it's a very warm welcome to Dr. John Oberg.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Let's just, before we dive into what type 2 diabetes is and the nuts and the bolts there, just tell us about your sample group, how it worked, just the results, because people are listening out there and saying, no, you can't reverse type 2 diabetes. It's impossible. I've
Yeah.
been on chronic medications for so long. And, I've been a physician, for 26 years here. So just give us that whole process, because I think that's very important.
I started this because my mother-in-law ended up in the hospital, and I didn't think she should have had to end up there. And that hospital stay cost about $100,000 US, and it could have been prevented with, like, let's call it $10 of medicine with just the right improvement. And after that hospitalization, I talked to her medical doctors, and I'm really impressed with her medical doctors. They're really talented people. And so I went back to the University of Southern California and said, I want to come and get my doctorate. I want to talk about reversing type 2 diabetes at scale. And I think there was a lot of like, hey, we've been trying to do that for 60 years. Good luck. Like, not going to happen, but come on in. We'll
Mm.
see what you can. And so we did this pilot study that you mentioned, and we took 50 patients in rural Louisiana here in the States, very low income, very low access to care, and very sick. So for the people in the medical community, average A1C, hemoglobin A1C of 9.6%.
Sure.
And so very, very sick. And so generally speaking, when you have a drug that can reduce hemoglobin A1C by 1 percentage point in 12 months, you've got $1 billion drug. We were able to reduce their hemoglobin A1C by 3.2% in 12 weeks, and then keep those people in control for the next 2 years, 83% of them without any hospitalization for diabetes or any complications relating to diabetes. And so fairly radical success in our pilot study. And we just finished data collection on our next study that we have not yet published, where we took people with an average A1C of 11 and dropped it to 7.88 in 90 days, and then further
Wow.
reduced it to 7.22 in 90 days further. Even more importantly, at 180 days, a third of those people came off of insulin entirely.
Sure. Good
Jaw-dropping
people.
results.
I want you to go through those stats and results from the first and second study slowly. If you're listening out there, your HbA1c is an approximation of your 3-month glucose average level. So that's when your doctor does it. Of course, that's just, looking at glucose, not fasting insulin that can be raised for up to 15 years. But Dr. John's dealing with some really sick people. So I think very slowly and carefully, people are listening out there. They might even have a good idea of what HbA1c is. You significantly dropped that and maintained over a 2-year process. Just repeat those stats.
Yeah, so for the first pilot study, we went from 9.6 to 6.4 in
Wow.
12 weeks.
Wow.
And we did that for the providers out there. We did that using only metformin and insulin. So no other drugs, no GLP-1s, no SGLT2s, just metformin and insulin. And so that was the first pilot study. And that was the control group that we kept in control for, the group we kept in control for 2 years after that first 12 weeks. The one person we couldn't get into control had an autoimmune condition that required a very specialized form of care. They were
Mm.
taking 200 units of insulin a day with no impact. So it was a very, very exotic problem that we couldn't
Yeah.
get solved with our process.
Okay. All right.
That was study number one.
Yeah. And study number two.
Study number two, we had 79 patients. The average A1C for that group was 11.06, so with a standard deviation below 2. And we actually took that group to 7.88 average within 90 days. So a larger drop, right? 6.5% is kind of where you want to get people
Yeah.
into control. So 90 days to get them from 11.06 down to 7.88. And then the second 90-day period, we got them from 7.88 down to 7.22. We'll then get people eventually down to 6.5 over time. But that was the study design that we did. And in that particular study, we took roughly 1/3 of our patients off of insulin at the end of 6 months.
Yeah, and that's off of insulin at the end of 6 months. Never mind if they carry on a year later to come off the medications. And yes, you use
That's right.
medications, but I want you to speak into the AI part of your business at Precina Health, and we'll get into your backstory of how you scaled businesses. Just talk about that. I think from understanding it's a three-prong attack of behavioral therapy or behavioral science, and then using AI and then personal care. So let's talk about the AI side, which I think technology is going to be the only way for us to beat chronic disease and to prevent chronic disease.
And I think you're right. And I think it's a little bit counterintuitive as to how we approached it. We took everything we knew about medicine in the medical clinic, everything we knew about behavioral health, everything we knew about non-clinical issues, typically talked about as the social determinants of health. But then we went further and looked at other models of health belief systems. And then we looked at non-clinical variables that perhaps hadn't been considered in a similar fashion before, things that were thought of, but maybe not applied. And we then put a severity score across all of these different things. So, what's the severity scoring of diabetes? How about comorbid cardiovascular disease? What's happening with other things like a broken ankle, maybe in some cases for some of our patients? And we took a look at all of the mental health issues, anxiety, depression, stress, highly comorbid with chronic disease, but then also some other, mental health issues that may not be comorbid. Sorry, they are comorbid, but not caused by disease, right? So, for example, we
Mm,
had one person dealing with grief because they lost their husband a year ago and hadn't gone through grief counseling. That was a real case that happened inside of our
mm,
practice. Then we look at the social determinants of health that are actionable, non-actionable. This is an overwhelming amount of data, too much for any patient to kind of take on all at once. So we applied readiness for change and said, where is the patient ready to make a change? And we focused on that singular area to make very small changes. And when I was reading about you, I think you and I have this in common. You talk to people about making small changes to make a big difference, and you've been
mm.
talking about this for, it seems like 20 years. And
Yeah.
so you're onto something. Yeah,
Mm,
we talk about and no matter how big the change the patient's willing to make, we make it smaller. And I'll give you a couple real examples. We had one patient who was the early stages of dementia, was only taking in calories with ice cream and chocolate milk, and they were unwilling to change that. And we said, no problem. What if we just change the type of ice cream you're eating? They said, okay, I'm willing to do that. So we changed the type of ice cream, and we changed their fasting blood sugar by 100 points in 7 days.
wow. Wow, that's
So
incredible.
tiny little changes, like maybe you should try a different coffee creamer,
Mm. Yeah,
like that
micro
type of change.
wins.
Or
Micro wins is psychologically such an important way to help people move one step at a time without feeling overwhelmed and without feeling a sense of shame, without feeling a sense of guilt that paralyzes people because once they have a big loss, then to get back over that mountain is very difficult.
you nailed it. That's
Mm.
exactly what we deal with. And so for us, we generally start with medicines. And this is where, you can't just have a doctor. You can't just have a health coach. You can't just have a therapist. You need to have all of that working in concert together. And so we deconstructed all of those processes and then built them into one rope of threads that worked for the patient. And so that really is the key. And so we generally start with medicine because it's the easiest thing to change. Get them on the right medicines
Mm.
and get them there, where you make very small changes very quickly. So when people are taking correctional insulin, we might change the dosages every 3 days with data
Yeah.
until we dial it in. Then they are feeling better, they have more energy, and we may not start behavioral change for 30, 60, 90
Mm.
days for some patients, where other patients want to start behavioral change on day one.
Yeah,
It just depends on the
meet
patient.
them exactly where they're at. Meet them exactly where they're at. Meet the person's need. If you don't consider that need and where they're at, you just basically steamroll them and it doesn't work long term. But before you get into the medicines, I want to talk about your data collection and how you're using AI
Yeah,
to draw things in because there's a lot of people that they believe in
yeah,
micro wins, but they're not getting a 98% success rate in terms of reversal of type 2 diabetes.
yeah,
There must be guardrails, there must be processes, there must be structures in
yeah.
place. Otherwise, it's a very complicated situation.
Yeah, so AI for us, this is the counterintuitive part. AI is used to lower the burden of work for our providers so they can spend the bulk of their time talking to patients in relationship. So
Mm.
it really is about we spend a ton of time with patients, one-on-one. It's not about the AI replacing the provider-patient relationship. It's about what you just said. Meet the patient where they are. The patient, generally speaking, wants to talk to a professional, a clinician, an expert, and they want help with an expert plan that's designed by a clinician, but for them. And so, where do we use AI? Yesterday, we talked with our team about how we use AI with meal planning for our patients and how AI can help the provider meet the patient where they're at. And rather than taking an hour to create a weekly meal plan, in just minutes, we can create the meal plan, dial it into what the patient is willing to do, very quickly give them a process for recipes so they can actually cook at the level they're willing to cook at, then create a shopping list within 60 seconds, and then actually go out and put the shopping list into a cart and have it delivered to the patient if the patient's within within a circumference of a store we deliver to, or they can just print out the shopping list, go to their store. They know exactly what package, exactly what size to buy. They can put in what they already have in their kitchen, so they're not overbuying, and they can cook as few meals as they want in a week. So for yesterday, for example, the patient was about, hey, I only want to cook 3 times a week. I want to have leftovers for 2 days. I've got this many people in my family. I don't know how to do the math to fix the recipe. I don't want to cook a lot. I don't want broccoli, whatever it is.
Yeah,
And the AI
exactly.
just spit all of it out using exact. And so that means that we actually suggested yesterday that the patient eat more carbs than would be recommended because it was less carbs than they were eating today, but it was more carbs than perfection. It was just one step further. And yesterday it was like, I don't want to eat oatmeal. Right. We won't use oatmeal. Can you live with whole wheat toast? Which most doctors be like, you can't eat whole wheat toast. It's
Mm.
like, I know, and we'll get there eventually.
Yeah. It's a
But for this
continuum.
week,
It's a journey. It's a
that's
continuum
it.
where the data is changing. It's interesting you're basing it on goals, which is obviously the most important initially. Do you ever base those AI inputs on data? So, for instance, if they've got a continuous glucose monitor that feedbacks into an app and then says, look, I don't want broccoli. And you're like, okay, you don't want broccoli, but maybe you are going to have polenta. And with the polenta, we're going to give you a certain amount because your average glucose was too high
Yeah, that's right.
today.
So we use cognitive behavioral therapy on the therapeutic side and cognitive behavioral coaching on the coaching side, which means we use motivational interviewing. So we understand that patients make changes for the patient's reasons, not for the provider's reasons. And so our team goes through weekly training on this. Like our
Mm.
therapists go through training, our doctors go through training, our support staff go through training to do exactly what you said a minute ago, meet people where they are.
Yeah, but I want you
And
to
we are
repeat
just
that. I want you to repeat that statement as one of the greatest statements I've heard. Patients don't make changes based on the provider's needs. They make changes based on their needs. If you're listening out there, it's your needs that you need to try and express to your physician, your healthcare team, your healthcare coach. At the same time, it's the responsibility of the healthcare provider to ask those questions and to come together in order to find out what your needs are.
That's it. And so in my TED talk, what I talked about was an expert plan means you have the expert giving the plan based on information from the patient. So
Hmm.
the patient's feeding back like what I'm willing to do. The doctor is saying, here's what needs to be done. And then how do we make steps toward that? And so you're not going to get to the top of a mountain by jumping. You're going to get there one step at a time if it's a long walk. And so we teach people how to take that one next step.
Hmm.
And that really people want that. And so it's an expert plan, right? Which means an expert's in the room. It means the patient's being a good agent for their own healthcare and saying, here's what I'm willing to do. And then building a professional and a personal community of support so that when it gets difficult, there's uplifting to support
Hmm.
that particular path. So where does AI come in? Well, AI means we make an easier meal plan where it's easier for the provider and patient to make that plan. It comes into chart review where we do something crazy. You're going to think this is nuts. Before we meet a patient for the first time, we read their medical charts.
From everywhere.
Like we actually take the time to go through their medical charts. Now, that can be thousands of pages of
Of
information
course.
in some cases. And so we have an AI go through and flag all the most important things and say, these are things you must read. These are things you probably want to read. And these are the things I'm deprioritizing and putting in their file. And here's the summary of what
Mm,
those things say. And so our providers can immediately go in and then we create what's called a continuity of care note, where we then give that out to all their other providers in the ecosystem. So their primary care provider, their endocrinologist, their cardiologist, they all get this along with our assessments and say, hey, here's everything we know from all their doctors. Here's some things you may not have known from doctors that are not in your subspecialty. Here's the assessment plan based on what you've told them, based on what the other doctors told them. Here's our recommendation. Primary care provider, do you agree or do you want to change this care plan? Cardiologist, what do you think? How do you want to change the care? And everyone kind of comes back together and we make recommendations. They all buy into it together. And now we go to the patient and say, here's your holistic care plan from all your doctors, all your care providers.
mm,
Here's a document that summarizes all of it. You can show them. And everyone's on the same page with a much lighter lift because we have AI making such easier handling of all that huge amount of information and data. And the AI can then look at that and also say, hey, by the way, based on all this stuff, there might be an assessment you missed for this condition. There needs to be a consult for this other subspecialty if you think it's appropriate.
yeah.
So there's 13 different ways we use AI in our practice right now. Those are a few of the ones where we have the kind of the heaviest lifting. We also have an AI built that's a very, very specialized AI where we can have a non-hallucinatory conversation with a patient. So the patient can talk to this AI as their co-pilot to help them have a better interaction with their provider to reduce shame, reduce guilt, have as much time as they want with that AI. And then we know that our AI is not hallucinating because of how we've built this very specific part of the guardrails. And so we can have clinical conversations that feed back into the conversation with the clinician. So when the clinician comes back into the office the next day, they can see the summary and then connect with the patient. But the patient might want to talk at midnight and we're just not available.
Yeah, that's powerful. So now, did you build all these AI models? Are they for commercial use? Did you just build them in-house? Because obviously, what you're doing is you reducing the energy load on the patient and the provider, especially on patients with so much going on. It just takes so much energy in this world, to find exactly what you need. Then you don't know what you need. Then you've got to research what food you're going to have, and then how much is it? So obviously that's what the AI is doing. But do you think this is going to be democratized and commercialized?
So we're using some commercial AI in places where people are building things that are generally good.
Mm,
We've even used some of the Salesforce agents that deal with like, how do you do a service AI? So you have a knowledge base of information and you have like a democratized AI like through salesforce.com. They can help you with that we don't have to build that. So then we spend all of our technology energy bringing in the models that companies with billions of dollars of development so we can utilize that, and then we develop the things that are like, hey, we need to have a non-hallucinatory environment for that phone call with a patient where they want to call
mm,
in, text in, have a video chat with it. So we build the parts that other people aren't going to build,
yeah.
to make sure that we have that done correctly. So the answer is yes to all of it. And then we've been very fortunate. Salesforce has a really amazing AI platform that all these things can be plugged into to make it one cohesive experience for the user, whether that's a provider or a patient. And we've really just used the heck out of that and really
Okay.
appreciate the work they've done there and they make it really usable for anybody. So the hope is that we're going to provide technology with big platforms like Salesforce. We're going to take the pieces that they don't do because it's so specialized, and then we're going to make that available to other providers that say, hey, I want to practice medicine in that way.
Mm,
But it's not about buying the technology. The provider has to go through basically enough training to know how to do the patient part of it, not just the technology part of it.
mm,
So a couple of things we're working on now, for example, this is not built and deployed yet, but we're working on this. We're trying to create an AI that the patient can let the AI listen in to a conversation with a volunteer community health worker or family member, listen into how they're talking about food, disease, whatever, and it will alert our therapists if there is a therapeutic intervention necessary so that you can reduce the cost of care of mental health by our guess is
wow.
95%.
That's incredible. No, I mean, the world is changing, and that's why I'm asking, because, I've even got someone within a tech in a huge bank here, came through our process of auditing functional medicine, the whole kabang, and then went to ChatGPT because he was basically a CTO, And he put all his data points in, all his variables in. And now he can just take a photo of a menu and it gives him a rating out of 10. Oh, this is 3 out of 10. This is 6 out of 10. Change the polenta to potatoes. Takes you from 7 to 9 out of 10. Takes a picture of just food on a table. The AI recognizes and says, listen, this is going to be detrimental for you. If you do this, you're going to have to change the next day. I mean, that's where it's getting to help patients and help clients make the right decisions.
Yeah, that's right. And so the parts that we have to build for our practice, there's three parts to the brain, as you know. There's the cognitive centers like your cerebral cortex. Then there's the limbic system that's emotional. Then there's the amygdala, which is that reptilian brain,
Mm.
right? And so computers do a great job of the cerebral cortex type of processing, and they really don't do a great job, despite all the work in sentiment analysis of doing the limbic understanding. And people make decisions emotionally, then they
Yeah,
justify them logically. And
sure.
so what we're doing is helping our computer emulate that so that when somebody wants to make an emotional decision, the computer can say, hey, here's the decision we're going after. Here's the logical support. Let me call a provider in to have that motivational interview or that emotionally supportive conversation. And so that's some of the work we're doing that other people aren't building that needs to be done in kind of it's not a therapeutic environment, but it's directionally that
Mm.
direction.
Now, are you seeing only patients that got significant health challenges, or do you see this technology going to people that are out there to say, look, I want to prevent disease. I want to take some of this technology, plug in my stuff, see where I'm at, get a health score. I need to know what I need to change. Maybe I need to see the AI analyzes and says, oh no, you need to see the endocrinologist first. Oh no, you actually need like cognitive behavioral therapy. Where do you see this going? Because you're obviously reversing a lot of disease, which is good, but at the same time,
Mhm.
we've got to try and prevent it.
That's exactly right. And so we have a five-phased approach for us. So the first phase is assessment, second phase is control, third phase is stabilization. Our fourth phase is about longevity improvement and like doing all the lifestyle work that
Mm,
gets you off of medicine. And the fifth phase is then long-term stabilization for a
mm,
healthy, long life. And so all of it is really, really important.
mm,
People who are ready for phase four and phase five, particularly people who are financially in a position to invest in that, like they're going to use what we do, and that's fine. But they could also get those answers from functional medicine doctors, concierge doctors,
mm,
direct primary care. There's a lot of models where people of means can get that help today, and
mm,
it's going to work maybe not as well, but it's going to work well enough, and they're going to be committed enough to get the result they want. It's
mm,
really people in low income, in low resource areas that we really wanted to solve this problem for. Because if we can solve the problem in the hardest areas of the world,
mm.
then everybody else can use the tools as well. That was our approach.
Yeah, but even as a functional medicine doc for so long, there's long waiting lists. It's costly. Even the people with resources, how do they get into, I'm thinking about this different with my mindset. Now I've got to act on it. Now it's got to become a habit. Then it's got to become a lifestyle. I mean, our greatest
Yeah,
challenges are sustainable transformation. The tech's got to come in there in a way to help
that's
people.
right.
So how do you see that working? Because you've gone a bottom bottom top approach, which I think is 10 times harder because it's so difficult. But we've gone a top down approach. How do you see this going in terms
Yeah.
of technology?
Yeah, so the AI app that we're building for our patients has a lot of different modules. I talked about meal planning. Obviously, we have medical adherence and making sure they take their medicine on time and gamifying that so that they feel good about it and they get excited about
Mm,
it. And doing those in ways like you mentioned that reduce shame and guilt. Those are really important. We also have like cognitive behavioral goal setting built in and daily journaling for gratitude built in. And so we have all these different things we can do that are very low cost when you use technology, and they give immense amounts of information to our therapy team and to our medical clinical team so that we can actually go in and have the right conversations without having to dig for it.
mm,
And these are all voluntary for our patients. So some patients will use meal planning only, some will use the full host of like life planning. And the goal is not for us to be all things to all people. The goal is to take the pieces they need to kind of move from here to there.
yeah.
And what I mean by that is, how do you set goals? How do you feel good about whatever it is you're trying to accomplish? Some
Mm,
people, longevity is really, really important. Other people, they just want to feel better so that they can raise their grandkids or teach kids how to read at the library or whatever their reason is. But it has to be a flexible enough technology so the technology is also meeting the person where the person is. Like,
mm.
that's just as important.
Yeah. So I can see the way you're going. Are you going to be also taking labs in and using AI, the superpowers of the world or the function healths of
Yeah.
the world? Is that going to be happening where you're looking at it and say, hang on, you need an action based on these labs?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that AI is fairly democratized already. And so you can put labs in and have it show to and the way that we do that is, Dustin Williams, who's at RMD, he's a world-class educator for doctors. And so we've basically got a data set that is a conglomeration of medical schools underneath RAI so that when those labs come in, it goes through like, what do you learn in the first year of medical school, all the way into the
Mm.
seventh year of, fellowship. And then it shows you, okay, have you considered ABC? Like that's really, really important.
Mm. But obviously, those parameters that you put in are, you've got the whole carnivore, and then you got the ketogenic, you've got all these diet wars. Some people are saying meat is bad, other people are saying it. So we run a very data-centric model. If you and your goal is you want to be an omnivore, or you want to be a carnivore, or you want to be a vegan, let's base it on the data. But the parameters you put in that AI are crucially important.
Yeah, and so for us, there's like the foundational science. I think you've got a background in Chinese medicine, so you'll appreciate this. There
Mm.
are things that Chinese medicine understands that may not be proven in peer-reviewed Western science, but it's been working for 3,000 years, and
Mm.
you have 100 examples of that. And so
Mm.
our take is like, look, here's the science from the Western world. Here's what actually the science says. Here's what we teach doctors.
Mm.
Here's what you're saying you found with Chinese medicine,
Mm.
Mrs. Patient. And so if it's working for you and it's not causing harm, you
Mm.
should keep doing that.
Yeah, you see, that's powerful.
People talk about eating for your blood type is a great example.
Mm.
I think Dustin would probably poo-poo that. And my answer would
Mm.
be, hey, if you've done all the fundamental medicine and that's working for you, let's keep it working for you because at the end of the day, we're going to
Mm.
keep measuring the hemoglobin A1C. And if your A1C is getting to the right level,
Yeah, that's the most important. Yeah.
that's it.
So, I mean, do you think it's going to, you think you got Peter Tier there in Austin, and then you got, say, Mark Hyman, or you got all these functional Andrew Huberman? Do you think people are going to be able to sort of just use those as filters instead of the science? I mean, we could debate the science and the science on, cholesterol and saturated fat and this, and, we've done it again and again. My view is looking at the data and what's the most important data and giving the weight to those data points. So HSCRP being 10 times more important, than LDL cholesterol, for example, ApoB
That's right.
being 10 times more important than, total cholesterol. So do you see it going in that direction? We use specifics from a data perspective?
I would say it's even something more fundamentally important is scientists have to be willing to let go of the things we thought we knew 10 years ago in favor of the things we now know today. And that's really most important. So a great example clinically that happened recently is that, SGLT2s were drugs that you weren't going to actually prescribe to people given congestive heart failure at
Mm.
one point because of kidney conditions. Well, there were changes that were made. The science was revised, and not all the doctors knew that. So it became our job to say, "Hey, here's the science updated on
Mm.
SGLT2s. It actually is indicated now, and that's brand new science. And here's the paper. Here's what it says, and we suggest this new protocol. What do you think?" Like that. I think it's about not just using data, but recognizing that the frontier of knowledge is moving forward, and we want to accept that. And
Mm.
then, I think we have to be also just mindful of the fact that 60 years ago, at least in the US, we got some bad information on the food pyramid,
I agree,
and
and
so
I
we
think,
want to
yeah, exactly. No, exactly. I mean, AI could probably look at a study and say, listen, this is the deductions that have been made, or the conflict of interest here is problematic, and actually, this science is not valid here in this area.
I think that's right. And I think you have to kind of hold that out with like, hey, we have 20,000, years of like information on the sociology of food and eating. And, there are things that haven't been proven, but are seem intuitive, like genetic modifications for food probably have an impact,
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
And there's a lot of anecdotal data. And so I'll give you another good example. There's two different molecules that are being used, well, several, but two that were studied in tirzepatide and semaglutide for
Mm.
GLP-1s. And Dustin and I spent 6 hours one day just looking at every scientific research paper that's been done in the last 5 years, and there's no data that points to the fact that they impact people differently. But we have so many patients that have had different side effects that we can say
Yeah.
anecdotally, not
Cool.
scientifically,
Yeah.
that yeah, some people tolerate different drugs differently.
Mm.
The science doesn't support why, but we can tell you that we have dozens of patients now that have reported differences, and that's just take it like that's it's just information, right? It's not
Yeah.
science, it's not peer reviewed, it's been our experience. And so we want patients to have that anecdotal information next to the scientific
Mm.
information, and then we can make a plan together.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, we've got empirical science. Empirical science is really, really important. So if you're using an AI to recognize patterns that are coming from two different types of drugs, that sample group is massive. If it goes into the thousands, the AI is going to analyze and say, well, tirzepatide is far better than semaglutide. And I think a lot of people, whether they physicians now, are understanding that. Well, it's from what I can see. So I think that's important.
I think there's a really important distinction. Tirzepatide may be better than semaglutide for some people
Mm,
or for a number of people,
mm.
but the reality is each person is going to have a different
Absolutely.
reaction. And
Absolutely.
so at the end of the day, you tell the patient, like, let's work through it for you, because
Mm,
I've had patients say, well, economically, semaglutide is the only thing that makes sense. Or, for other patients, like, hey, I want to try one, then the other. Like, again, this goes back to individualized medicine, right? Like
mm.
we talk about personalized medicine. We
Yeah.
wanted to call it precision medicine, but you can't do that with all the work happening in genetics. So
Yeah.
it's not precision medicine, it's personalized
Yeah.
medicine. That's what we're really trying to get to here is every person a plan.
But the AI is going to work out to say, listen, there's a genetic snip of MTHFR here, so tirzepatide is going to be better. But if we've got these factors over here on genetically, then the pharmacodynamics is going to work better. I mean, that's going to happen. It's not going to be a scientific study because you're not going to be able to get a
That's it.
group probably together, but you're going to just recognize patterns. And I think that's where AI has got its strength to recognize patterns.
That's right. And it's going to be probabilistic, right? So you're going to say
Yeah.
to somebody, let's try over here first. And if over here doesn't work, then we'll go to the next thing.
Mm. Okay. Using your model, I know you've been very strong with regards to metabolic health, and maybe you want to just define metabolic health because I think that's important. Where else do you think there's going to be a great change with regards to using the data and AI?
So right now, we're already starting to see similar types of results with hypertension, congestive heart failure, and we think that those patterns are fairly obvious to us because of the way the body works. We also, though, are seeing some results with pulmonary disease, so asthma, COPD, and while the inner working of the body that doesn't make sense because the treatment methodology is similar. We think we're seeing similar types of impacts there. And even we're talking to doctors about how you can titrate people off of steroids more quickly so they have less steroid in their system. So we think that the computers are going to help us treat all of those things much, much more quickly.
Okay.
And really what that means is that when you look at food as medicine, and we haven't coined that. People have been
Mm,
talking about food as medicine for a long time. But when you use food as medicine, I think we're going to see very similar results in, those areas as well.
mm,
And who knows? There are people that are currently suggesting that maybe it'll have an impact on dementia, Alzheimer's. And I don't think the science is strong enough to kind of plant the flag there yet,
mm,
but it's very interesting study that's being done.
mm. Sure. Now, your current patients or clients, do they have an app? Do they put in their continuous glucose monitor readings? How does it practically work?
Yeah, the answer is yes. They do get access to technology. They
Mm,
all interact with it differently. CGMs aren't necessarily great in our world for people. There's cost reasons, but more importantly, when someone goes through the process of entering their blood glucose number into a document, they process it differently than just looking at their CGM real quickly.
okay.
So we do have patients that we use a CGM for on and that makes a ton of sense in terms of like monitoring behavior and giving patients data who are kind of forward. But
Mm,
there are other patients who really need to be, taking the blood sample with this prick and stick kind of old school, and processing the information that way is better for them. So every patient different.
okay. Good. Just give us a sort of view in terms of a message of hope for chronic disease. Do you really think, the big four horsemen of cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative conditions, and metabolic disease, do you think technology is going to get it to a state where it's not increasing to such a degree? I mean, I've never seen 26 years here. I've never seen chronic disease from young, old. We had Dr. Gator on the podcast talking about American children.
Yeah.
40% of American children have a chronic disease. I mean, never mind in 10 years when they're not children or 15 years. So where do you see this going, in terms of AI and tech?
Yeah, I think here's the message of I would give. I think that there as a social worker, I look at the micro level, which is the individual, the meso level, which is the community, and then the macro level, which is the policy level. And I think we've got some work to do on the policy level that is going to take some time. And I think at the community level, we have some work to do, which
Mm,
is going to take less
mm,
time, but still going to take some time.
mm,
Here's the hope I would give the individual at the micro level. Despite the fact that policies may not be perfect and communities may not be perfect,
mhm,
we now know for a fact that
mm,
in 98% of our cases in our pilot study, the patient can take agency of their own healthcare journey. And if they're willing to be committed to that in little tiny steps, they can actually improve their health in material ways for the long term, despite there being a policy in community level policies and norms that don't support long-term health. Like you can do it as an individual, despite the fact that the world is not the perfect place for it today. So if you're saying, hey, the policies stink and the community is horrible, yeah,
yeah.
I agree with all that. Yes, we need to change all that. And you can actually change that for yourself right this minute if you want to, despite the fact that it's difficult. I don't want to like say it's not difficult. I don't want to say that it's not getting worse in the world.
Mm,
If you want to fix it for yourself, we at Precina have a way to show you to do it with confidence for yourself. And we will fix the community problems over time. We will fix the
mm.
policy things over time. But for now, despite all that, you can do it for yourself. Like that's the message of hope I have for people. You
Yeah.
can do it now.
That's powerful. The message of hope, you can do it now. 98% success rate. Tell us the states that you're licensed in, and we 48% of our listeners are in the US. So if people want to contact you, can they contact you from anywhere? And do you see international clients?
Yeah, and give us a call for sure. Like at the very least, we'll talk about what we're doing with you. We're currently licensed in Texas, California, Oregon, and we have 18 other states that we're in the process of licensing. That by the time this podcast goes live, we'll probably
Mm,
be in 20 some states in all
okay.
likelihood. We'll be in 40 some states in no time.
Mm,
We've already started up our nonprofit group called Precina Metabolic Innovation Lab, which is pointed at research development and internationalization of what we do.
mhm,
Dr. Victor Liddell, who used to run mental health innovation for UNICEF, is a medical doctor who's helping us with that effort. So we recognize this is a global problem, and we think that we can help people. Now, there's localization that has to happen. There's a different set of problems where you are in South
mm,
Africa than there are here in the US. But
yeah.
but with this individualization, with this personalization of medicine, we're willing to kind of lean in and
Mm.
help people right where they are.
Right. Do you think, last question, the democratization of finances, if you just look at sort of crypto and having a phantom wallet, and banking is going to change significantly, and there's going to be a lot more control where you can just send money overseas and interpersonal transfers and just cut out what we call big organizations. Do you think that's going to happen the same with healthcare? If you just think the medical insurance companies have all your data, they have your details, it's almost this sort of, I don't want to say big pharma because big pharma's got a really important place, but it's this sort of disparity between the medical community and the individual, this chasm that causes, I think, a lot of problems. Do you think healthcare is going to get democratized to a certain degree where people are going to hold their own data, use their own AI agents, use Precina Health and say, listen, you know what, I just want to deal with these guys. I don't want to deal with my medical insurance. How do you see that being played out?
Yeah, I really hope so. I think, one of the things we talk about internally is giving patients agency for their own healthcare. Like, how do you get people to, like, we have a very consumer kind of focused society in the US. And people are focused on how to consume things. If we can teach patients how to consume healthcare in the way they consume everything else, I think we're going to have a healthier world. We're going to have a healthier patient, and then policy follows behind that. If you take that consumer-like approach, now that doesn't mean that everything has to be transactional. I think there have to be great relationships with care providers and
Mm,
patients. Like that patient-provider relationship at the center is so fundamentally important. But if the patient can step up and say, I'm going to be an agent for my own healthcare, I'm going to be an informed consumer of what's happening, I think you're going to drive much better conversations inside the
mm,
clinic. You're going to have much healthier patients, and you are going to democratize this in a way that is good for the entire system, the patient fundamentally.
mm. And do you think the costs are going to go down, Dr. John? Do you think that's going to come down? I mean, I know US costs are so high. Do you think that's going to
They
help
have to.
regards to cost?
They have. They have to. Like what we are doing is not sustainable. The
Mm,
costs must come down.
mm,
And I think AI is one of those answers. I think,
mm,
the movement of information and data is a part of that answer. But I really, really believe that,
mm,
consumers, patients
mm,
consuming healthcare.
mm,
And that doesn't mean you can go to a buffet. You can't have a patient come to our practice and say, give me this drug and that drug. Like that's not going to work. That's not going to be
mm,
helpful.
mm,
So it's a different type of consumption, but it's being informed about the process and
mm,
then asking questions. Like, yeah, I went to a doctor recently and they're like, hey, we want to give you an antibiotic. And I said, hey, I know it's inexpensive, but I know the impact that has on my gut. Like, can we skip the antibiotic for a week? And if a week from now it's not working, he's like, that's so smart. Yes, that's the right
yeah.
approach. But had I not thought to ask that question, I might have ended up on an antibiotic unnecessarily.
Yeah, because you've got the knowledge and you're applying the knowledge at the right time, which I think is crucial. So, do you think my daughter, who's 9 years old, I've got a son who's 21, and she's nine. So, do you think within 2, 3 years she's going to have an AI agent, either where she just speaks to it and just says, "Listen, you know what? You know my genetics, you know my lifestyle, you know my sleep patterns. Should I be eating this? What sports should I do? I love doing this. Okay, do it, but do it for 45 minutes. Don't over exercise. Keep your heart rate to 175. Get the recovery, jump in an ice bath, don't jump in an ice bath, use a peptide, don't use a peptide. Is that going to be the future of the people that have got resources to have their own AI agents?
My hope is that what we do is the AI comes along and says, hey, you need to go talk to this doctor and you need to ask these four questions. And here's why you're asking these four questions. And here are the likeliest outcomes, but I'm not a doctor. And so go talk to your doctor about this. And you're seeing that AI is doing a better job in some cases of diagnosing than some doctors. But I think that human in the loop is so critically important
Mm,
because the expert running the AI does so much to make the AI more powerful. Like I couldn't go and code in Java because I don't know Java. So I wouldn't
mm,
know when the AI was making a mistake. So I think we do need educated humans running the technology, at least in the short term. That may change in the long term, but in
mm,
the next 3 years, my hope is that people are good enough at asking questions of the AI to get great information back to facilitate better relationships amongst
mm.
humans. Like that's, I think that's really what I hope happens.
Well done. Well, wanting to declare favor and blessing over you, your business, your calling, your mission in life. It's incredible. I just think it's amazing that you started with sort of the lower LSM. I think it's fantastic. People that can't afford services. That's noble. We need more people with a heart for those that can't afford healthcare. And so, yeah. I'd love to get behind you in any way we can, and we're already trying to advance this podcast, throughout the world. I think it's noble. Well done.
Well, I think we'd love to come back and tell you about more of our results as we go, and
Mm,
certainly keep in touch to tell you what's going on, and our paths are going to cross again. Like you're into wellness and
yeah.
longevity, like that's the conversation we need to be having with people: is what do we
Mm.
do today that makes tomorrow better?